Part 3, here we go. One of my favorite rivalries in the 90s, Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker. Now, at their first match at Ground Zero, it was a good match, but man, was it chaotic. It was, the referee got knocked out at the beginning, and then they just brawled throughout the arena. Then they got back to the ring. There was a second referee, and then they actually have the match. Good match. Showed the athleticism of Shawn Michaels, the toughness, and The Undertaker being, as badass as he is. And then in the match, I think this time it was Shawn Michaels. The first referee got knocked out by The Undertaker. The second referee got knocked out by Shawn Michaels. And the third referee comes and was like, screw this. He calls for the bells. Like, we're ending this match now. No contest. And then they had like a bunch of wrestlers come up, pull them apart. And then with one of the coolest things I had seen at that point, The Undertaker runs, jumps over the top rope, and lands on 10 guys. They all catch him, they fall down, and then he just keeps on brawling with Shawn Michaels, and then Shawn Michaels and Triple H are able to run away, leaving The Undertaker in the ring to, I guess, celebrate, but it wasn't a victory. That set up the first ever Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood. And that match, that's one of their best matches I'd ever seen. They've had 5 matches. That one is probably... where did I put that? I'll do that another day. But it's one of my favorite matches, and probably my favorite or second favorite Hell in a Cell match I'd ever seen. Because there was a great amount of psychology in it. You saw the resilience, the battle that both men were putting into this match. It was hard-hitting, it was brutal, it was intense, it was great. Not to mention, they were saying there's no escape, but when a cameraman gets knocked out by Shawn Michaels and they try to take him out of the ring, out of the cell, Shawn Michaels escapes, The Undertaker right behind him, and then they brawl outside as well, outside of the ring, on top of the cell. Shawn Michaels hanging up, like it was like a scene from a mob movie, because he's hanging on, and then The Undertaker just stomps on his hands, and then he just falls back and crashes through the announce table. And what was great is Jerry Lawler had a great line where he just goes, "Incoming! Incoming!" and then bang, just crashes through the table. And then they get back into the ring, and The Undertaker cracks Shawn Michaels upside the head with the steel chair. And man, I know they take precautions to not hurt each other too much with those chair shots, but man, the sound of it was just something else. And then, just as The Undertaker's about to win, here comes, "That's gotta be Kane!" Vince McMahon, one of his last times as being an announcer, and Kane comes out, rips the door off his hinges, tombstones The Undertaker, and Shawn Michaels covers him 1, 2, 3, and has to be dragged out of the cell, and he was the winner. It was a great match, and not to mention it's set up for The Undertaker's rivalry with Kane. Yes, the Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart is another thing that happened from that, but I'm doing the Undertaker retrospective here. The Montreal match has been talked about so often by so many people, I really don't need to talk about it. So, after Shawn Michaels becomes champion, they have a casket match at the Royal Rumble that year. And I like how they talked about the last time The Undertaker was in a casket match at the Royal Rumble, there was 12 people that helped the champion win the match. And then sure enough, like deja vu, you had 10 guys come up and help Shawn Michaels. They beat The Undertaker, and then Kane comes down, beats them all up, or sends them, running away, thinking there's going to be some sort of, reconciliation between the two of them, and then Kane just tombstones him again, and then throws him into the casket, and closes it, causing Shawn Michaels to win the match, and then he lights the casket on fire, and that was an interesting way to really set up the WrestleMania match at WrestleMania 14. Unfortunately, this is probably my least favorite Undertaker Shawn Michaels match, mainly because this is the match that almost cost Shawn Michaels his career after that back body drop over the top and landing on the casket. It was, mainly for that reason, it's probably one of my least favorite of the matches they've had. So, at WrestleMania that year, Undertaker versus Kane. It was another one of those hard-hitting, brutal matches. What was kind of funny was before the match, you had Pete Rose come down, and he talks crap about Boston. How they never won a World Series, city of losers, Bill Buckner, and he played total heel, and he was funny. It was fun to see. And then Kane comes down, tombstones him, and everybody cheers. They cheer the guy. Cheer the villain because he tombstoned Pete Rose, and the Undertaker comes down in one of my favorite entrances of the Undertaker. It was really cool to see, and then the match, it took 3 tombstones to finally beat Kane, but it really established Kane as another monster for that roster, even if he did lose. And then they had the Inferno match. Yeah, that's what it was. You had to set your opponent on fire. And that was another cool moment where the Undertaker jumps over the top rope after Kane, I don't know how he landed on the outside without getting burned, but he starts fighting with Vader, and then the Undertaker jumps over the top rope, boom, lands on him, they fight again on the outside, and he knocks Kane into the fire, burns him again, and the match is over. And the Undertaker is able to celebrate in the ring. Really cool looking celebration with the fire shooting up. After this, the Undertaker and Kane, somewhere down the line, they start seeing like they're going to be working together. Paul Bearer's not there anymore. They got Steve Austin and Undertaker win the Tag Team Championship from Kane and Mankind, but then there's some sort of friction between the two of them, and the Undertaker and Kane are now working together. And at SummerSlam that year, Highway to Hell, which had a great build-up to it, man, that was one of the best build-ups I've seen in the 90s. During the Attitude Era, I mean, you really felt like this was like one of those. It really gave importance to SummerSlam as one of the big 4, because at this point I believe they did have the 12 pay-per-views, but to really distinguish it from the others as one of the main main pay-per-views was really cool. And it was one of the best matches the Undertaker and Steve Austin had. Undertaker jumped off the top rope, leg drop through the announce table, the Stone Cold. I mean, he put Stone Cold over the top. I mean, Shawn Michaels, really made him the champion, but it was the Undertaker that made Austin and put Austin over to the next level as the big hero. And then you had Kane and the Undertaker had an alliance with Mr. McMahon. And it was a triple threat match. The Undertaker could not pin Kane, and the Kane could not pin the Undertaker. They had to pin Steve Austin. And it was really interesting because you had the Undertaker and Kane trying to do what they can to win the title, but cost the other one the title. It was really interesting, and how the end of the match was really interesting. They're really cool. Was they gave him the double choke slam, and they both covered him and did like this sort of a cover where they're both on top and they both win the championship. But the next night on Raw, sorry about that. The next night on Raw, Steve Austin comes and beats up McMahon again, and instead of awarding one of the titles, he says, "All right, you know what? You two are gonna fight for it." And I forget what the next pay-per-view was. And they were in a one-on-one match, and it was Steve Austin as a special guest referee. And so Steve Austin was going to be fired if he didn't count the 3. And what happened was the Undertaker came, had the match, and Paul Bearer comes down, and he looks like he's going to hit the Undertaker with a steel chair, realign with Kane, but instead he turns on, hits Mankind in the back of the chair. Undertaker gives a tombstone, does the cover. Steve Austin refuses to pin him and refuses to give the 1, 2, 3. Gives Undertaker a stunner, counts them both down, and Steve Austin is fired because of it. That sets up the War Games War Games tournament. I think it was War Games. It set up for the championship tournament at the Survivor Series that year. And the Undertaker and Kane are both in it, but they both get eliminated. I don't remember the tournament too well. I do remember the ending, but I don't remember too much of what happened during it. Then at the December pay-per-view, Austin's reinstated. They have a Buried Alive match, which was good. The Undertaker was evolving into that Lord of Darkness, the demonic Undertaker character he had in '99. But then you had that match was cool, not as good as their previous match at SummerSlam. And then you had Kane come down as the Undertaker. I think he chokeslammed Austin into the grave, and then Kane comes down, beats up the Undertaker, and he costs the Undertaker the match, and Austin's able to enter the Royal Rumble. Fast forward, the Undertaker's on scene for a while. Then he shows up in his demonic Lord of Darkness, like the whole robe and the beard with and nobody, he shaved the mustache and the whole deal, but then he just keeps the longer beard. And then he starts the Ministry of Darkness. The rivalry starts with the Corporation. WrestleMania 15 goes against the Big Boss Man and Hell in a Cell. It's an okay match, but it's not as good as these other matches. There were some cool spots, but not as good as his other matches were. And not to mention, like, the ending of it was kind of weird with how he hangs the Boss Man from the cell. And then after that, he starts his rivalry with McMahon. He continues his rivalry, with McMahon. Kidnaps Stephanie McMahon at Backlash. And one of the coolest things I'd seen on a pay-per-view in the 70s, the limo drives off, Stephanie McMahon is, wait for my dad, and the window comes down, the Undertaker just turns on, where to, Stephanie? And that was a really cool scene, like straight out of a horror movie. And then the whole sacrifice, the sacrifice scenes were some of the creepiest things I had seen from the Undertaker, and he was a big Undertaker fan. And what I hated about his 99 run, his Ministry of Darkness run, was that he allied with McMahon's corporation, the corporate ministry. It's not good. They should have been separate entities. A corporation and a Ministry of Darkness should not be together. They should be separate, and it could have been two separate heel factions instead of trying to combine them. It doesn't work. And he wins the WWE Championship from Austin at Over the Edge, and that's the pay-per-view that Owen Hart tragically dies at. And so that match is never, that DVD will never come out. That pay-per-view will never be shown on DVD. Even when they talk about Austin winning the championship, they don't show the match. They just show the Undertaker with the title in a match against Austin that, to be perfectly honest, was somewhere in between the match at the Buried Alive match and their SummerSlam match, but too much emphasis on the McMahons, I think, in that match. And his match against The Rock, I mean, they did everything they can to make The Rock look like $1 million, because he gives a rock bottom to the Undertaker in 50 seconds into the match, seems like he's going to win. But Undertaker does retain the title through a lot of trickery, which to me, it's not really Undertaker's. Not really what I liked about the Undertaker. I liked when he was just be able to kick people's asses. And then he would lose the title the next night to Austin. Sometime later he has a alliance with the Big Show. Tries to make him, more tough and badass. They win the tag team championship together, but then they lose it to the Rock and Sock Connection. And the Undertaker leaves the WWE for a while. This is the last time we would see. From what I find out later, he actually had an injury. He had to take time off from that, and this would be the last time we would see the Undertaker in that sort of dark side persona, because his next persona would be so different from what we had seen the previous 9 years that, well, I'll get into that next video. So stay tuned for that. Part 3 it's probably going to be a lot quicker the years I go through. So until then, take care.